I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, which is the postseason, preseason, off-season, and ostensibly the very best basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. Fortunately, Andrew Kuo never takes a day off.
I've just been sitting here silently since the last pod, waiting for this thing to fire up again. So I'm back.
Your work ethic is incredible. And I was about to say, you've had the off-season
of dreams,
Mamba mentality. But look, no jokes. Let's get to the huge breaking news of the day. We're probably going to dedicate an entire hour and a half, maybe 2 hours to this.
Emergency pod. Joe Johnson,
the MVP of the Big Three, has signed a deal
with who? With who?
The Detroit Pistons. Andrew Kuo, what do you think about that? Okay, so moving along.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that out of the way.
Fire.
Did you watch the debates last night, speaking of breaking news?
I did. It was very interesting. Well, I guess it was interesting. I really enjoy that stuff. Andrew Yang holding it down.
Look.
What?
We're going to get into Yang Gang, the Asian man named Andrew from New York City who loves dunking on 8-foot rims. Why would you want to talk about that guy?
Who went to school in Providence, who loves the Knicks. I don't know. There's something about him I just enjoy.
There's something about the way that he can graze net that really resonates with you.
Yo, he's dunking on that 8-foot hoop like he meant it.
Can we just wait? I know you're chomping at the bit.
No. We can talk about your Baidan.
You are ravenously, aggressively trying to talk about Yang Gang, and I understand it. But it was the Democratic debates. There was more than one candidate, Andrew. And Yang is a bit player in this Greek tragedy of terrible candidates. Okay, so who won last night? Let's just get it out of the way. Who won last night?
Beto O'Rourke won the debate. Everyone kind of turned to him, man. Everyone had their moment where they talked about Beto's performance after that horrible mass shooting in El Paso. And the format of like the previous debates didn't really help Beto because Beto's like a long speaker, and I don't hate him. I kind of really like him a lot, but it takes a while for him to like grow on you to express a point. Like he delivers his message slower than the other guys. And last night he had a chance to kind of get on a stage and explain himself clearer, and I thought he did really well.
I agree. I think it did take Beto longer to find his sea legs in this debate format because we, as the public, knew him as the guy who was running against Ted Cruz in Texas. And he was young, and he was good looking, and he was charismatic. But it was really that he was running against Ted Cruz in Texas. So on the national stage, he was a total non-entity. He was Andrew Wiggins-esque in most of the early debates. But now he actually has a point of view. And as you said, not only do people have to respect it, but he kind of found his calling in the same way that Gillibrand had really wanted to be the sort of feminist Me Too candidate, but that moment eluded her because it was last year. And Beto now is the tip of the spear for gun control reform. And I thought he was good. And he really has now an angle that he's running on, which is gun control, and it happened in El Paso.
And it's interesting to see how, like I always joke when, I think I've mentioned this before, like when you go see a DJ or a performer, but mostly people get through like the best songs, the hits first. But in hour 4, you kind of see everyone's personality bubble up and like what they have on hand. When they get a little bit tired, they just want to go. And then you can see what they really enjoy listening to. And it's sort of like this is what's happening as these candidates falter, and we kind of understand that Beto, Yang, Gillibrand, a lot of these Buttigieg, a lot of these candidates probably aren't in the mix, and their personalities are coming out, and they can shoot shots because the ceiling is higher and the floor is higher, maybe, right? Like, Beto cannot make a huge error by saying he wants to ban guns because he's probably not in contention.
Yes, but it also, because we pretend that this is a basketball podcast, it's a matter of, are you a specialist or are you a superstar? And Warren thus far has been the superstar. She doesn't need to stick to one topic. She can bounce around. She's generally very quiet in the debates, which is great because you don't get sick of her. And when she speaks, it's the adult in the room.
I like her.
Yeah, it's hard not to like her. She's competent and smart and personable. She's great, but she's so far been the superstar. She's LeBron James out of these debates. And then you've got the guys like Beto who have to find what they can do. Okay, I'm up here. I don't really know my job. Okay, there's a mass shooting. Like, that's my role. I'm a gun control specialist. And I think we saw Buttigieg and Harris struggle because people thought they were stars. They came out of the gate strong and there was a lot of interest. And now we're realizing that they may not be stars. They may be guys who aren't real, and women who aren't really good at anything in particular.
I really feel bad for Kamala Harris because it seems like she is being coached about how to be likable, and she presents herself as such like a aware participant in this game, and it's just not coming across right. And she's trying so hard. It's the Amari Stoudemire of debate candidates, right? Amari was trying the hardest out of anyone out there. He was just running to the wrong place for the rebound. So he'd be like jumping out of the arena, but 2 seconds too late. And I feel bad for people who aspire for such greatness, but you could see their limitations.
She reminded me a lot of Keith Van Horn out there yesterday.
Not Officer Mitchell?
Well, she did take the full cop turn. And I think her conundrum is really emblematic of being a moderate at this point in the Democratic Party, where you're being pushed left by Warren and Bernie, but you're a cop. And, like, there's a thin blue line that one cannot cross. So she's trapped between trying to sound woke and progressive and then her cop-ass bona fides about, like, being at the funerals of police officers. At the same time, you see her kind of backtracking universal health care into a swampy, spongy place where I don't even know what she stands for anymore. And that's kind of the Democratic Party. It's like they fetishize cops. They fetishize military people. They always want those kind of characters to run for office. See Harris, see Klobuchar, see Buttigieg. And yet they're trying to appeal to the same communities that are abused by law enforcement. It doesn't work.
Well, the thought I started having was, I really enjoy a political person who can change their mind. I find that to be more reassuring than someone who just sticks to their original conceit, because being president is really hard. Being a senator is really hard. Representing anybody's interests is very difficult. And I kind of trust people who, for example, last night when Kamala Harris was asked about her policy as a cop, and she said she had changed her mind. And the things that she did then, she did for a reason, but the things that she's saying now are coming from a different place in her life. And I love that. I think more politicians should talk about that, because the most annoying thing is bringing up a soundbite of Joe Biden 50 years ago and him trying to defend it as if he still cared about it.
Yeah, that's always an interesting dilemma in politics. Are you a hypocrite, or are you changing with the tides of public sentiment to a more popular position, or have you evolved? Mm-hmm. When President Barack Obama did not believe in gay marriage. Did he really not believe in gay marriage and then change his mind several years later? Or was it just that the consensus among everyone had shifted and he updated, or he was able to then push an agenda that he actually believed in all along? Like, I don't know. It's hard to say, is someone evolving in their opinion or are they being advantageous?
And it's a case-to-case kind of situation. And I agree, that's the challenge of, voting for somebody. And another interesting thing I was thinking about last night was everyone kind of came together and recalibrated after maybe every 20, 30 minutes and said, we're all on the same team to defeat Donald Trump. And I was waiting for them to talk about the things they didn't like about what he has done, which is a long list of things. But when foreign policy comes up, the more I'm thinking, like, when Trump became president, my initial thought was, I'm not sure what he cares about. It's unclear, other than maybe money or his reputation. He certainly doesn't care about foreign policy, and that was a whole idea of the bubble and the U.S. first kind of idea. Am I allowed to say I'm really grateful he didn't go to war versus Iran? It was there for him, and he didn't do it.
I was thinking about this the other day when he had Bolton, who is a hawk for war in Iran. Clearly,
was Bolton about to put Derek White on the USA team?
Yes, that's exactly what he would have done. But Bolton took that position thinking he was finally going to get his war with Iran. He's been trying this bullshit for decades. And at least for the time being, Trump resisted, whether it's because Russia, who is his big homie, was like, no, we're good with Iran. Hands off. Yeah. I don't know. But
or he could be like, sounds complicated.
I mean,
who knows? We'll never know.
Who knows what he thinks about Iran? But I'm sure.
That's my point.
I'm not even a big like Russia. But Russia being cool with Iran is certainly tempering the flames of war from the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to my original thought years ago. I don't know what he cares about. I'm just not sure what he really, Medicare for All was one of Obama's talking points, and it felt like he really, really cared about it. It felt like he cared about basketball. It felt like he cared about Jay-Z, the boomer that he is. But I don't know what Trump is into.
Trump's policies are a coherent agenda of white nationalism. Is that something that he deeply cares about? I mean, probably to an extent.
But he cares about pleasing the person next to him, right?
I think that's true. But I do think that based on his history of being a racist and having a father who was probably in the Ku Klux Klan, that his belief that America is a white nation and that they are superior to other groups, whether it's blacks or Latinos or Jews or Asians or Muslims, anybody, that is a coherent belief for Donald Trump. And his policies across the board do reflect that. Do I think that he wakes up stewing about those things? Not really, but it is what he does. And I can't say that his policies are completely divorced from his public opinions because they actually are coherent. They're attacking every other group and repeatedly and in very cruel ways that you just would not allow if you disagreed with them.
And as you're speaking to things I very much agree with, maybe the debate format isn't the place to be talking about this thing, and maybe we have to fight. The Democrats have to fight among themselves in order to have a person to talk about these things later on.
Also, who is the one who was like, come on, we shouldn't be up here disagreeing with each other. Like, we're on the same team. No, we're not. Fuck that. This is a debate.
Gang said we're on the same team.
Get out of here. This is a debate. No one's on the same team. You're literally running for president of the most powerful nation in the history of the earth.
And he said that
we're on the same team. Like, no, man.
But to him and Buttigieg's credit, they were trying to save Castro from himself, because Castro tried to gotcha Biden about something he did not even say. So Castro was like, you said you have to opt in, but he never said that. So the rest of the candidates were trying to save Castro.
Yeah, Castro was trying to lick some shots.
I don't even mind that.
No, Castro's feisty. That's his only role at this point.
I like him.
It's like go after guys, and I respect it. And even with Beto, he's like, you handle it so well, but I am Latino and they looks like me. I'm like, oh, Castro's trying to out Beto on El Paso.
Oh, and you have to do that. And Yang was talking about this maybe a year ago or months ago. He knows that all these candidates, aside from the top three, which would be Biden, your boy Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren, all these candidates will be forgotten. So in order to be remembered, in order to perpetuate interest, he has to say the same thing every time instead of taking a broader picture. So he always mentions, what did he call it? Democracy dollars?
I was about to say, it sounds like someone's been on the receiving end of a few Liberty bucks.
But that's what Castro is doing. And you almost have to become a specialist at that point, to your point. In basketball, because you are not a multitasker anymore. You are not an alpha multitasker. You are Bruce Bowen, who just plays great defense. And in order to
Castro's best case is Marcus Smart at this point. Like, I'm gritty. I'll get in the trenches. You want me on your team, and I might become vice president because you want to be above it all and this unifier, and you need me to go down there and throw some bows.
The strategy. I love this end of politics because the strategy is so cool. And you're right. A lot of these guys and women are trying to realign themselves with things in the moment, based off of polling, based off of performance in these debates. And right, like maybe Castro sees Warren and is thinking he could be her running mate.
I mean, Buttigieg is a great vice presidential candidate. Mm-hmm. I don't love him. I find him
How come?
I think he's a smart guy. I don't mind hearing him speak, but he's also so calibrated.
Very much so.
And even the way that, look, I don't want to say why he joined the military, but it also is like a convenient thing if you're going to run for office as a Democrat, is being in the military. There's just a lot of things about him that seem as if this is checking off boxes. And in that exact same department, running for president in this way, elevating your national position, potentially becoming vice president, and then potentially running for president after that, all falls into the same like trajectory, the same ladder climbing maneuvering that he's been doing this whole time. His thing about I wish we could go back to September 12th just made me like vomit on the spot. Like it's one of the more insane ideas that gets regurgitated incessantly, and it's infuriating to hear that bullshit.
Well, I mean, that was sad for many reasons, but an odd reason I felt sad about it was it reminded me of George Bush, like W, and it made me feel like we were in the big S simulation thing. Like,
oh, here we go.
But we hated Bush as much as we hate Trump, and it felt like what am I doing with my life? Like, we just fixate on these things we hate so much, and then they just go away, and I forget about them, and there's another thing to hate. And it made me kind of sad.
It's so true. The amount of emotional and intellectual energy that was expended from all of us towards fearing and loathing George Bush and Dick Cheney, and then how that was so alleviated by Barack Obama. It wasn't
for us.
Yes. It wasn't that Barack Obama was an amazing president. It was that you didn't have to invest capital in hating him and being infuriated and upset about stuff. And then now we're back on that as if George Bush and Dick Cheney didn't do this exact same madness, 12 years ago.
I mean,
12 years ago, freaking 18 years ago.
They invaded the wrong country, man. Like, that's a little unforgivable, right? Like,
that war crime it's slightly unforgivable.
It's really tough to think about that and how cruel that is still. And I'm just glad Trump did not pick a fight with Iran yet, like a military on the ground fight.
And I think Trump is the worst president we've ever had, at least in our lifetimes.
Hold on.
By certain measures.
The dumbest. But
he's the dumbest. But to your point, he did not don't kill millions of people by invading a country to steal their oil. He has not done that yet.
And it was there for him to just say yes. Like Bolton was ready, man.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing. Like, if you don't have that much blood on your hands, even if you're a moron and a racist and all this stuff, if you haven't killed millions, you're still not at the top of the heap in terms of worst presidents.
Right. And being president is hard, man. And that's such a dumb sentence. I know.
Question.
What?
Is it? No, really, is it?
I think it is. And I think I know where you're going with that. But I don't think this is for everybody. I'm talking about not you and me. I'm talking about these people on the debate platform. I don't think being president, it might not be for Andrew Yang. I hope it is. It's hard to tell with his background and, I guess, sample size of how long we've known him as a public figure. But, oh, man, I don't know.
Thinking of Andrew Yang as president is insane.
Why?
Because we're talking about Andrew Yang here.
Yeah, but tell me why that seems insane, because I think it's very plausible.
You think it's plausible that he could win? I think it's insane because...
No, not that he could win.
Because he's running on one issue.
No, he's not. He's running on so many issues.
Look, I know he has his agenda lined up, but I mean, in terms of his public play for the presidency and trying to just buy people's votes, like he's having a sweepstakes to give away... what, $12,000 a year to 10 lucky families? I mean, he's Willy Wonking the presidential debate. It's wild to think of that guy being president. I don't know what it would entail on a day-to-day basis. But a guy who's just running on like...
You know I'm going to call you racist. But I think it's very plausible, and he's explained it to an extent where it just sounds repetitive now. Countries have done this. This is not out of the ordinary. Other people have proposed this that you would think is presidential. A lot of famous people have proposed this idea, and I think reducing him down to one thing is like saying Bernie just cares about healthcare or he's a socialist. I'm like, both those things are kind of half true because of what he talks about, but it's not. And of course you can walk and chew gum. I mean, I hate that analogy and they always say that, but Andrew Yang has a concise, realistic answer for every single question.
Well, when I'm asking, is president tough? It's more along the lines of, well, how involved do you want to be? Because someone like Donald Trump is clearly not involved in many, many, many things, where he delegates and then if shit hits the fan, then he rages about it. So if you wanted to be a micromanager and you wanted to be involved in the whole labyrinthine web of government activities, you could do that as intensively as you wanted. So yes, of course, I believe almost anyone who's on that stage could be president and it wouldn't just go off the rails. I'm more talking about a guy who's running with that policy that isn't really mainstream and isn't even one that seems to necessarily resonate with most voters as being the wedge of his entire campaign.
I mean, I see him as a Steph Curry, or even in the game that the USA lost, I forget which player shot like 14 threes. Oh, Bogdanovich. Which Bogdanovich? We'll never know. Oh, Bogdanovich shot 14 threes.
And Bogdanovich.
Plural, Bogdanovi.
I was about to say, I think it's a Bogdanovi situation.
And I see Andrew Yang almost in those terms because he is accelerating an idea to a point where it seems ridiculous. But when you look at it, it's not so ridiculous. And his brand is math. He makes those hats that say math on them. He always says the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. But really, he's the most emo candidate on the stage, because if you listen to him after the first sentence, he talks about like this is hokey, but I really love it, is like what it means to be human and bandwidth. And if we're constantly worrying about money, we're not worrying about how to enjoy our lives. And
you're just saying this because he's a Knicks fan. You're reading way. You're like, oh, I see him. I see the new metal. I see the goth. You know he has a Smiths t-shirt. He used to go to Sway on Sundays while you were there. I mean, there's a good chance that you guys were in the same room at Sway.
I hope so. Listening to The Cure. or actually, The Cure wasn't played at Sway because there was a Morrissey versus Robert Smith beef. It's weird. Rules, man. Everyone has rules. Every subculture has a million rules. Oh man, one of my favorite artists, talking about rules, is Oliver Payne, and I think at the MoMA he had a room where he played this record by this band called the KLF, who's great, and it was called the Chill Out Room, where it's just like you go there, you listen to the music, and you just chill out on the floor. But he had everyone, he had people. He had asked a bunch of people to be security. So it's like, you're not chilling out right, sit up. It's like, you can't chill out there, you got to chill out over here. And it was like a whole kind of police state that he orchestrated, and I thought that was really great. Anyway, it made me think of that.
I kind of miss that when nightclubs were big enough or nightlife venues were big enough to have separate rooms with different music.
Oh man, well, Elsewhere tries to do that in Bushwick, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Because they have the little kind of store shop upstairs, and yeah,
it's like a mega club, and there's like a house DJ upstairs. There's a rock band in a smaller room, and there might be no rap. There might be electro. Is that what you call it? I don't know. I'm so old, man. Like
Baby's all right. Has music in the front room. They'd have a DJ in the back, but but it's kind of different though. It's not the same as
real.
like
Yeah.
Like Copacabana back in the day. You'd have like the Latin room, and then you go in the back, and it'd be like, it's the hip hop room.
The Limelight. I mean, I used to go to Limelight when I was in high school, and each floor had a different vibe. I mean, your spot in Berlin does that, right?
Well, Berghain has the main part is techno, and then there's another DJ upstairs. It's two. But it's not really the separate room thing is kind of weird though. When it could be a small little room. Limelight. That was the whole deal.
Mm-hmm. And Good Room also had the small room. I saw Young Thug and Jamie XX in the small room at Good Room.
I meant to go to that, and I didn't, and I regret it.
Oh, come on, man. Young Thug. I couldn't believe he was there. And then I found out he was doing a Vice party down the street. But I couldn't believe Young Thug was there. It blew my mind. It was a tiny room. There was like 50 people in it. I don't know. I really love that Jamie record.
I don't think I've ever seen Thugger perform except for at a V-Files show. And I can't even remember if he actually performed or if he just kind of came out and walked around or got on the mic for a second. I just don't recall.
Sometimes those are fun. I was recalling that one time I saw, I think it was a Fader party. There was a DJ, and I think they just put Sham on the cover, and that's when he was kind of really hot, like he was on the radio and stuff. And he got on the mic next to the DJ and was so amazing. He like blazed through like 5 songs, and he really was into it, and it was a fantastic performance. Sometimes that stuff works.
That's true. Sometimes it does.
And mostly it doesn't. That's my point. Usually it's a disaster.
And the special guest, Travis Scott.
Right. Especially when you need effects, right? Like Future could never do that. You have to become a boomer lyricist at that point.
I saw Future perform at the Williamsburg Bank that they turned into a venue. Also, I believe, it was a Bacardi event. And I saw Chandler Parsons in the building wearing a big gold chain. And I want to say Future performed and was very good. Man,
I saw Future perform at a CMJ event, and his hype man was like in the mix a little too loud, and it just ruined the entire show. And I was so excited to see Future, but I'm still bummed about that.
Before we make everyone turn off this podcast because of our boomerisms, does CMJ still exist?
Nah, it's over.
So for those who don't recall, it was New York City's version of South by Southwest, where it was, I want to say it was College Music Journal, I believe. Mm-hmm. And
I would even rephrase that. South by Southwest was Austin's version of CMJ, which had been around forever.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And sprawl of Austin and the wide streets are far more conducive to that kind of event than New York City was. Because New York, it would always be like, okay, we're going to run over to Wetlands now. There's something at Southpaw in Brooklyn. It was not the same as being in Austin and being able to like sort of walk around a 10-block radius.
Yeah, and New York, it was towards the end, it was really concentrated on Ludlow Street and pianos and cake shop, and even Bowery Presents on Kenmare Street, Kenmare and Bowery. I've seen some really fantastic CMJ shows. A ticketed one when the Foo Fighters put out the Color and Shape, which I think Rolling Stone just put out a top 40 emo albums of all time list that was very well received. But there was no Color and Shape, and I always thought of that record as a pivotal emo record.
Fader Fort was also, or it was the Fader show in CMJ, and then that became the Fader Fort, which is, of course, a big deal at South by Southwest. But the Fader event in New York during CMJ was always very fun.
I loved it. Yeah.
I remember seeing Petey Crack perform at a spot on Ludlow Street, and then we all went to Max Fish with Petey Crack, and he invited us to go down to Philly. Me, Wildman, who's a former DJ partner of yours and a buddy, and we did not go down to Philly for his birthday party, which
that would have been a wild scene.
Which I kind of regret.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
But not that much. I regret it, but it doesn't keep me up at night.
I DJ'd the Fader Fort CMJ show, and the sound guy was great. And I remember unplugging and A$AP Rocky coming up right after me, and I hugged the sound guy. We chatted for a second, and I went to another thing. And little did I know, minutes later, he would get into a fight with A$AP Rocky and split his face open. I think he had to go to the hospital. It was so bizarre. And that was the infamous fight that A$AP Rocky, who seems to love to fight, had at CMJ.
I was coming to that event, but I was late. And I showed up and it was shut down, and I was completely mystified and went on Twitter or something, and I started reading all these tweets about Rocky getting in a fight, and I was standing outside the now empty venue really confused about what had happened.
Yeah, my memory is bad, but I think friend of the pod, Catch Dubs, was right before. But I had been hanging out with that sound guy, and I only mentioned him because he was like one of the nicest sound guys I've ever worked with, and I just really liked him. And he wasn't flustered because those events are so hectic. To have like a really stable sound guy at your side is like awesome, you know?
Yeah, well, for his troubles, he got his wig split.
A$AP Rocky loves to fight, man.
Loves to fight.
Except not with Donald Trump. He doesn't want any of that smoke.
Well, speaking of people who've gotten their wig split, we could use this juncture to talk about USA basketball.
Ooh. What about USA basketball?
Well, the boys from the States had a somewhat disappointing performance in FIBA international play. They lost a crucial game to France, a tarring of our national identity, and then dropped another game, this one to Serbia, a moment of mortification for the Stars and Stripes, to be sure, leaving them now in the 7th place bracket, where they will finish either 7th or 8th in the FIBA Basketball World Cup.
Out of their control. They're done playing, right? It's based off of the results coming in, because I think they're finished. Serbia was their last game, right?
No, I think they have to play Poland.
Are you serious?
Marcin Gortat has dropped 40 and 17 with the United States losing by 13.
They got to play the hammer?
Poles. They got to play the Polish hammer.
Oh, man. Just as like an exercise, I'm going to support Colangelo on this. How dare these players say no to this man? How dare they work on their vacation?
You want to work on your game? You do it in China.
Yeah, away from your family and friends before you start a grueling season. But also, this USA team should have won. What's up, Donovan Mitchell? Play better.
So Kobe Bryant, who's had a lot of comments about things lately, he said that we should get used to this happening, that we should become acclimated to international teams defeating the USA team in international play. I don't think so, because I also recall everyone saying this exact same shit like 15 years ago.
I mean, me and you care very much about this, but as a whole, the NBA fan base does not care about this, right? This is some goth stuff. No one is buying The Cure's 7th album, but we are, right?
Well, caring about USA basketball is certainly a boomer behavior.
Mm-hmm. And hey,
I mean, we are citizens of the world on this side. Like, no borders can hold us.
I am mad that I didn't watch a single game. I don't have ESPN Plus. I want to watch these games, man.
We've talked about this. They made it impossible to watch, and I think now, in retrospect, it was only because they knew that they would bring enormous shame upon the narrow shoulders of our nation.
Yeah, but from what I gather, the key rule change, or the key to international success, seems to be the pick and roll. Colangelo did not put together a pick and roll team. He put together just a bunch of vibey guys that like wanted it more, instead of players who are good at basketball. I know Mitchell Robinson hurt his maybe knee in rehearsals before the tournament, but he would have been the perfect player if he's healthy and on the team, and I'm glad he isn't because he's injury prone. He would have won them the championship.
I was thinking about this, and you can look at the team they had, and it's not impressive in terms of the players who committed to the team. It wasn't as if they turned down better players necessarily.
No.
But you could also say, is like Triple J a better option than a Plumlee? I would say he's a lot better than a Plumlee.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't feel like they built a team that was particularly sensible from a basketball standpoint.
And I remember there being a lot of analysts that questioned the Derek White ad, and it was split between people saying that he wasn't a good enough player to represent our country on this stage, and other people saying he was a perfect fit because he's a complement to other players. I'm always on the side of do not assemble your team based off of need. You just get the best players, and he's not even the best fit.
I haven't really gone through the list of players who could have been on that team and weren't. Mm-hmm. I do feel like it would take me about 15 minutes to
put Trae Young on that team.
To like swap out the bottom half of that roster with guys that I would prefer to have.
Realistic guys, like younger ones, and not the super duper stars like Klay Thompson.
Here's the big question. Would they have lost if Carmelo Anthony was on that team?
No, they would have won it all. Clearly, they needed baskets. No one could shoot.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if Melo is good enough to help any NBA team this season. But in a tournament where Luis Scola, who can't even walk,
eating your lunch,
and has been out of the league for 3 years, is dropping like 32 points a game.
Yep.
Put Melo out there, man. The guy wanted to play. And you're like, nah. We have a Plumlee.
As Donovan Mitchell, probably the best player on the team, goes 4 for 12. It's clear that you just need someone to score the basket. And we are not against volume scoring, even when it's not the perfect efficiency. Melo wins that entire thing for USA.
So after yesterday's humiliating loss, and
deliciously humiliating.
Oh,
I mean, we love it. We love it.
Just a disgraced sandwich that's really arduous to observe and ingest. Jerry Colangelo,
your boy,
facing withering criticism, said that he's going to remember which basketball players refuse to play in this tournament when it comes time to picking the Olympic team. What exactly is that threat? That you're going to run it back? You're going to get a Plumlee out there and Derek White, and you're going to go and win the Olympics? Like, what exactly is that threat?
Oh man, he is.
But what does that mean?
I know. Yeah, it doesn't even work as a threat. It's just so dumb. He's so Biden-esque, man. Like, I understand where he's coming from, and this is related to our last pod. I don't even blame him for being a giant boomer.
It's like, you didn't play in this tournament, so we're not going to let you play in the next one, even though we just lost. Like, oh, so this is about you. It's about you? Yeah. You're down to lose the Olympics because, like, guys didn't play in this one?
Well, it's like deflecting blame from someone who constantly wants to teach someone a lesson. Because if it is about him, then he has to take the blame for this loss. But he's not. He's blaming the players, but he's like, it's about me. Then, therefore, when they win, do we congratulate the players or you? And I think more players will join the team on a bigger stage. And this was my whole beef. Colangelo and company handled this Team USA thing like they're handling Major League Baseball. We don't dislike baseball that much. We don't even dislike this weird tournament in China, this FIBA tournament. But they could have made it so much more palatable for the fans. Let us like it. Show us the thing. Have tryouts. I suggested something that doesn't even work, but wouldn't it be cool if the superstars who said no, like LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant, like nominated a player, being like, I nominate Trae Young for this team. And Trae Young's like, all right, if Curry wants me to go, I'm here to represent the NBA for USA.
Oh, sort of like the Civil War, where you could like pay someone to take your place?
Well, I thought it would be a cool reveal on TV, being like, Curry, who's the next you? And he's like, Trae Young, man. It's like, Trae Young, will you play? And he's like, sure, I'll play. And you can have this whole fun thing, like half-hour episodes, and talk about their relationship, you know?
LeBron James has nominated Rajon Rondo.
Just the greatest basketball minds. But that would have been infinitely more fun, right? Because if Rondo has a bad tournament, the whole thing is social media gruel.
Well, I always love less gruel, but there is something about this team in particular that rubbed everyone the wrong way. People were far more gleeful than upset by their loss. There was the camp that said, we saw this coming. This team isn't that good. The roster is not particularly strong. It doesn't make a lot of sense from a composition standpoint.
No, they should have won. That was a good enough team.
I agree with that too. But overall, people were jubilant for the most part that this team lost, which is really wild because I can't say I've ever seen a USA basketball team that was more mocked and reviled. And it really did have the, I don't know, like the triumvirate of things that we dislike involved. You had Duke basketball, you had the Celtics, and you had Colangelo, and it was just
and cops
and cops. It was an incredible just
bad boys
amalgam of things that you hate to see.
Yeah, right. There are a lot of, in terms of NBA Twitter nerddom, these are all players that we love to kind of mock, and there's Schadenfreude here. You know, I don't know how I don't know how people who'd be interested in this tournament feel about our current state in the world. And I think it's easy to root for these European players who we kind of know. Like, we know Nikola Jokic. We even know Scola. Like, these are not players we dislike. These are not no-name Russians that we've never heard of. These are NBA players.
Yeah, the U.S. team, if it was a personality type, would have been like the dark triad for the things that we dislike, plus with a badge attached to his chest in the form of Donovan Mitchell. But what's interesting about international basketball is, like, it's great as the international talent is. When you look at the stars in the league, particularly the young ones, it's amazing how many foreign-born players there are. Ben Simmons, Embiid, Jokic, Giannis, Porzingis. I mean, there are a ton. Doncic. There are so many.
RJ Barrett. Say the name.
Andrew Wiggins. The Maple Mambas. The Maple Mambai, excuse me. But there is a ton of international talent. I mean, even if Kyrie wanted to play for Australia, he could. There are so many, except that they don't pose a real threat because they're on so many different teams. Like, the U.S. has this built-in advantage where they should always destroy everyone just because the other guys play for like 25 different teams, and the U.S. is still, for obvious reasons, where, say, even half the stars come from.
And this is the danger of not being able to watch these games, because you're right. All the things that you said are right, and that's the only talking point we have. I think allegedly Popovich went small and didn't run the pick and roll, and they got crushed by Gobert.
But like Harrison Barnes was on this team. Would Harrison Barnes even?
He's good enough, man.
He's good enough. He's good enough that they should win that. But he's also not a guy that I would have chosen. But to your point, a team with even, say, guys who range from 40th to 30th in the NBA, not even getting like a top 20, a top 30 guy, should still wax international competition because the other team has one Giannis. The other team has one Jokic. They only have one Evan Fournier for you to stop.
There's only one Frank Smokes, man. Oh, yeah, Frank Smokes. I'm ready. I'm glad we waited on him.
I mean, how many NBA games would that French team win with Batum, Smokes, Fournier, Gobert? Like, that's probably like a 35-win team.
But this is the joy of a one-and-done tournament, and I'm really looking forward to see if Silver does that one-and-done mid-season tournament. This is the danger you run into. If Donovan Mitchell has a bad night, you lose because he's supposed to be your buckets guy, and Jason Tatum's hurt. It was a cacophony of bad things that had happened.
I'm even spouting boomerisms that I don't even believe.
Hey, we're making magic, baby.
Look, we're potting here, man. Because my general belief is like the high idea that there's no excuse. I'm like, there's always an excuse. They shot bad. What the fuck do you want?
Oh yeah, it was a bad night for the officer.
We should never ever lose. Like, yeah, man, the other team shot better. Like, go take a nap.
Yeah,
like, whatever. Like it's basketball. Like
Smokes played the game of his life.
But you also, like, if you play basketball routinely,
or
watch it routinely,
touch
look,
net.
But if you can slap glass, you know that sometimes the bad team wins. It's basketball. Like, the lousy team wins sometimes.
I love one and done. I think it's so exciting, and I know it's unethical, but I watch March Madness, and it's just chaos. And I love when the best team like Duke doesn't get to the finals. It's great.
Look. Was it Turkey? Easily should have beaten the U.S. team. The U.S. team was not that great. And we only know that because they lost like those two games and almost lost to Turkey. That's actually more the point than them losing one game and being upset. Mm-hmm. It's that they clearly were not that good of a team because they were in all these close games and rarely just stomped the shit out of a team that was supposedly comprised of high caliber talent.
Yeah, I mean they didn't figure it out. The sheer talent, the concentrated talent of Team USA, ekes out a situation like Turkey for sure. But it's the beauty of the one and done. It's Donovan Mitchell not shooting well. That's all.
Yeah. So tough luck, Team USA. Better luck in the Olympics with the same exact team.
Do we care? Like, do we care about? Have we ever cared about international ball? Like. No, right. So it's like we're trying. That's why it's so funny when they lose because we don't care about this. We cared once. We cared when it was the dream team and we were kids. But we cared because it was awesome to see those guys on the same team. That is different than caring about winning because the spectacle of all of them together was astonishing. Kind of, it was something that was a treat for the fan. It was a gift But we didn't care about the actual games. Those games were really boring. It was David Robinson just dunking.
And it can't be replicated.
Was he on the first team? Yes, he was.
Yes. And it can't be replicated because it was these iconic figures in the game for the first time on a national scale. And now that the pros have been playing in these tournaments all along, we can't get that feeling where we're like, oh my God, Durant and LeBron together. Like, we've seen them together. They've done this. Like Kobe, LeBron, like they've done this. We saw it happen in the Olympics, in like the World Games, in FIBA, etc. So like that was a once in a lifetime basketball moment. And I remember watching every single one of those games. It was just a phenomenon.
And it reminds me of how petty Colangelo was in '92 as well, because he left Isaiah Thomas off the team.
You know, when we talk about the Colangelos and the Sixers, without getting too into the weeds,
it's our wheelhouse, man.
It's our wheelhouse. To me, it was always more objectionable that Jerry was brought in and what he did than Brian. In terms of Brian was a poor GM. Mm-hmm. He in retrospect, you can look at his moves and say these were bad decisions. Whether he was the one coming up with these ideas, he was the one who made them actionable, and they are attributed to him. The poor trades like the Markelle Fultz decision, squandered draft picks, etc. But the bad guy has always been Jerry. Jerry's the bad guy. Brian's just the large adult son. Jerry has been a fairly bullying figure for decades. And it goes back to being an owner of a team, USA Basketball, up until yesterday. The guy has been a bully for decades and decades and decades.
And he, not only is he an apex boomer and a one percenter, he represents this idea of what we're watching that we are trying to age out. Like, David Stern was well loved as a commissioner, as a representative for people like Colangelo, but he really benefited from Michael Jordan and Nike and the evolution of streetwear, to be honest, and that helping the product of the NBA. And, you know, we used to heap a lot of credit on Stern for making the NBA what it is now, or putting it on its path. But as we look back, like, he made that questionable CP3 trade redaction, and as soon as we saw Silver kind of come in, we realized how far this hobby or this thing could go, and to have Colangelo represent Team USA is just kind of frustrating. I was trying to think of other people who would do a better job. Like Quavo would put together a better team. You know, he won the All-Star Celebrity MVP. You know, like, he's part of the whole thing.
What about Mountain Dew? Like, they've got Kyrie. They can get maybe LeBron. I think there are Space Jam, for example, could put together a great international team. But with Colangelo, you know, I think there's this population of guys who are older, and it's a boomer mentality towards sports, that they own it, that it is their property, and they will make decisions, and you can just eat shit. And I think that he comes from that generation and is very overt about that feeling, that this is his game, and everyone else is just fortunate to be a part of it in some element, whether it's playing or witnessing it. It is his sport. And I think the owners generally and often have that feeling, but they've gotten better at cloaking it.
Oh, absolutely.
They understand how objectionable it is and why they want to be called governors instead of owners, because it feels wrong. But Colangelo is one of the guys where it is unvarnished, and you know exactly that he thinks he is basketball, not just the NBA, but international basketball. The league is his, the teams are his. And that's what I meant when I said he's been a bullying presence for decades. Like, this has been his thing.
And his quote to the players who opted not to represent the USA in this tournament was very close to, if you're not with me, you're against me.
I mean, he used a war analog. Like, bro.
Yeah, it was just
this is not war.
That
this
was
is not war.
For sure. We're not Dale Davis showing up to warm-ups and fatigues anymore. Yeah, we're past that. He's not reading the room. He hasn't been in the room for ever. Like, our way of watching basketball has changed so much in the last 10 years.
And, you know, if whatever your politics are, you may be a member of Yang Gang.
Yang Gang.
But if you're Jerry Colangelo and you donate money to Trump's reelection fund after Trump attacks Curry and LeBron, calls them low IQ individuals, shits on them on Twitter, de-invites Golden State to the White House, etc., you are making it clear whose side you are on. Even if he votes for Trump, even if he supports him, to donate money in a public fashion and public record after the greatest players in your sport are at odds with the president of the United States, you are making it clear that you think you are bigger than the players and that it's about you and your opinions. I'm not saying people shouldn't be allowed to donate where they want. I'm saying given his position in USA basketball, that is a fairly distinctive middle finger.
I disagree. Only in the sense that, above all, I believe Jerry Colangelo views himself as a businessman. And it's true what you said, but I wouldn't take it as far as creating like a black and white situation. I think he's just trying to protect his business interests. And a lot of people do things, but not in that kind of loaded way. He may have donated to every single candidate.
He has donated to some Democrats as well, but he is definitely a Republican. He is a pro-life Republican. And again, you are allowed to have whatever positions you want on the political spectrum. I am just suggesting that to publicly donate to a guy who has attacked the biggest stars who could potentially play for the USA basketball team seems to be making a statement. And this is a guy who also fundraised for Sheriff Joe, who gave money to Jeff Sessions. And, you know, when he was in an interview with The Undefeated, he was asked, "What is your old Chicago neighborhood like now?" And this is his quote. He said, "A lot of Hispanics. When you think about it, back in my day, like in the 50s growing up, the Hispanic influence had not hit yet. And so that's really changed. In our neighborhood, it's now like a war zone." And then he went on later to say in that same quote, "The whole neighborhood is just like a wasteland." So I'm not sure that JC is just a businessman. He's not just a businessman.
Oh, God.
He's
such a boomer.
There is a political bent here that I find at odds with representing a sport that is comprised of many young minorities.
And that's 100% fair. And that quote is troubling, and he's an apex boomer, man. Like
he is the most apex boomer in basketball.
Yeah, I would say so. Now that Donald Sterling is out, that's terrible company. But yeah, and hopefully we see a slow change out of this. Like, I want Colangelo to enjoy the game as much as we do, but to have him in charge of Team USA just seems tone deaf. And I think they could have made it more fun and have LeBron James put the team together. Like, this could have been such an opportunity for joy. Instead, right from the jump, it was an opportunity for skepticism, for, criticism. And I think if we get to a lighter subject about this international tournament, is the way the world sees something that maybe Americans don't see the same way, not in terms of like the rules of the games in the tournament, but also how they play and pick and roll and styles evolving outside of the U.S. And it reminds me, I've been thinking about this all week, and I think about food constantly.
I assume you do, because whenever you're not recording, which you are recording all the time, but whenever you're not, I always see just a flurry of images on Twitter from like the 17 restaurants you seemingly have gone to within like the last day and a half.
I have like a list running on little Post-its that I keep in my pocket, and I go hunt down these little delicious treats.
Do you go to a place for one meal, or do you take like walking food tours where you're just sort of coasting from restaurant to restaurant over several hours, trying like a smorgasbord of delicacies that you read about on Eater?
What I was getting at was the economy of the food market, I think, is the most interesting part, and how sustainable is it to provide like a niche food item in New York City in 2019? It's really hard, and I'm really disappointed that Bourdain didn't get to try his pier of. He was gonna. One of the piers on the west side, he was just going to make a giant international food hall of these places that he had highlighted in his shows. And honestly, he said before he died that the Trump immigration policy made it virtually impossible to do it. But also the New York State or the New York City real estate market made it impossible.
Well, right, because the whole appeal of the night market or street food, etc., is that they are, of course, authentic. It's a grazing experience where you go from stall to stall, from vendor to vendor, but they're also cheap. And there's
Sometimes.
well, a lot of them are. The ones that we talk about, like street food, they're cheaper, they're affordable, they're for people and maybe not tourists, at least initially. But to do it in New York, because of the economics, you can't really have a thing like smorgasbord. What's it called? Smorgasburg.
Yeah.
Smorgasburg, where you walk around and go to a bunch of different people because it's prohibitively expensive. Okay, cool. Let me eat this $22 lobster roll. Then I'll meander over here and I'll eat this like $17 umami burger. And you're like, cool, I've just spent $60 on 3 snacks.
I was just in the Chelsea market the other night, and I really wanted to try. There's a new Thai place called Ayala, and it's not very good. And I had a bad meal there a few weeks ago, so I went back to just try their pad Thai, just to see if they could do the simplest thing well. And it was, so whatever. It was fine, but it cost $14, and it felt like a restaurant. It felt like if I had gone to that amazing food hall to try this pad Thai, I'm out. Not only was it a huge portion, it was an entree price. And I wish, like, right, when you travel, you get these little paper boats of food, these little bites, and they're very affordable. And that's what I really want in New York City, but I understand also that it's impossible to do.
Yeah, I'm not even knocking the vendors. That's the reality between paying people, between permits, between real estate, even if it is a smaller little pop-up. It's just really, really expensive to do business. Thinking back, and I don't know if it still goes on, but in Red Hook, there was the soccer fields over there that drew lots of Mexican and Central American participants.
I've always wanted to go to that.
I don't know that it still goes on. It was really amazing, and then it got very popular on food blogs and then subsequently gentrified. And not the vendors themselves.
How do you mean gentrified, though?
It became a destination for like the white foodie community.
That's okay.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. It changed the dynamics of like the prices for them, the attention on them.
Are you talking about authenticity? This is
not quite.
Okay.
Not quite. It was that.
I don't believe in authenticity.
But from my understanding of it, the attention on it changed the prices. It changed like the permitting. It changed there were a lot of things were altered by the amount of attention that it got. But the authentic part, the food was still authentic. It was the same food.
I'm glad we brought that up because last episode, I was thinking as soon as we stopped recording that what we were really talking about was authenticity. And we mentioned this book by David Epstein called Range, and it was about seeing a problem through a different lens and maybe coming up with a better solution through that perspective. For example, like a great puzzle maker might offer fantastic financial advice because he has a different experience than someone who only thinks about finance. We were kind of dancing around the idea of like trust, and can you trust someone who is not into pizza to tell you where the best pizza restaurant is? In your mind, yes, but with your eyes, it's really hard, or with your ears, the ear test, right? And
isn't this kind of also, for example, Steven Jackson had an Instagram and it was like, if more or less to paraphrase, if you're not good at basketball, you shouldn't be saying who's good at basketball.
Of course, he's wrong, obviously.
Oh, I mean, of course he's wrong on that. But
he's right to think that.
Are you arguing the same thing? Like,
yeah, he's right to think that. I don't discredit his position on that. I just disagree. But I don't think he's necessarily wrong. It's not a right or wrong thing because he could have examples where he's indeed right. And there's examples, I can't believe I said indeed, but there's examples where for sure nerds are wrong. Trae Young.
Well, I mostly mean the stance that you have to be good at something in order to critique it. It's like you can't you can't critique a restaurant if you can't cook the food. You can't talk about movies if you're not a filmmaker. You can't critique art if you're not an artist yourself. I think that just runs into a lot of problems as policy immediately.
Never trust the skinny chef. Like, what? You know? But right, so I
also don't begrudge any basketball player who thinks that way, because
that's
sure, you're entitled to. That's you've made your living and your life in this sport.
Valid argument. That I disagree with.
Yes, someone on the internet, you're like, fuck you, man. I've been involved in this sport on the highest possible level for 20 years. I've made millions doing it. I've been in the locker room. I've been in the film sessions. I've been on the court in huge moments. Like, I have no problem with Steven Jackson taking that stance.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's why I thought about the authenticity and the believability of people, and you could just decide to believe somebody and then you don't have to worry about it. And food kind of plays into that, and it kind of creeps into your brain when you're just watching dribble by stuff happen and Donovan Mitchell. It's like, what do I think I'm watching, or what am I think I'm
You are
absorbing?
Stony as hell today, Kuo.
What do you mean today?
You were mentioning something before we got on air about fried fish.
Oh,
and
right.
I thought that's where you were going.
Well, it wasn't as interesting as kind of where I went, Ben. Oh, man,
The eye of the beholder.
you were having a Donovan Mitchell game, dude. All right, the fried fish thing I thought was interesting because I heard this study that if you eat one serving, focus, Ben.
Pin it down, Detrick.
If you have one serving of fried fish a week, it increases your life expectancy. But if you have 2 servings of fried fish a week, for Americans, it's a J curve where it decreases your life expectancy. But in the rest of the world, it keeps on going up in a straight line. And
is this Fishhook theory?
Why do you think that is? I mean,
well, I introduced this as the fried fish thing, which you already had told me. So right. I inadvertently
It's cultural.
Spoiled it.
Right. It's cultural because we enjoy delicious fried seafood in America, and other parts of the world eat different kinds of fish. So we eat a ton of tilapia in America. It sells well here. It tastes good. It's big and meaty, but it's like not good for you at all. But it's still a fish, so people think it's okay. In the rest of the world, they eat a ton of mackerel and sardines and stuff that we should be eating. So Americans consume the wrong kind of good thing.
And the people who are most likely to be eating fried fish are probably also living in poverty.
That's true too. I mean, there's a lot of poor people around the world, though. Like, I don't think money demographic stuff comes into play as much, but it might, because a lot of poor people in Asia eat steamed fish.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the United States in particular, that eating fried fish in the United States, it means you probably live in certain areas, and it probably means that you are eating a kind of regressive old school diet where fried fish is accompanied by other fried items. If you're eating fried fish, you're probably having French fries with it too. Yeah,
the prep is easy. It's a peak delicious. It streamlines like a business to just be able to dunk stuff into like one fryer.
And if you look at people who have lots of money, their access to fried fish on a daily basis is not high.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not something that falls into the diet of the 1%er.
Yeah, for sure. But for sure. But then there's that butter thing. The 1%ers love butter. Butter's very expensive. And French food is centered around butter. And there is no French paradox. Like, they got rid of that idea, right? They just eat less food than Americans.
Yeah, I think so. There's all those theories. I'm just trying to figure out how to do everything like a French girl.
Like Frank Smokes?
Just the entire, every single article, do this like a French girl. Like, wear elaborate dresses like a French girl. Wear men's suits like a French girl, everything like a French girl, because they are, of course, the paragon of taste and class and erudite fashion.
And since this is a basketball pod, like how does that relate back to international play? Are we handling this game, this tournament, with a different lens than the rest of the world? And have they come up with a better solution than we have?
We should be viewing this like a French girl and rooting for Frankie Smokes as members of the New York community.
Well,
the interplay between Paris and New York endures in this moment and is stronger in many ways than the connection between New York and the rest of America.
And I'm glad. Is it possible that Frank Smokes' trajectory is going exactly as planned? When we drafted
Phil Jackson knew.
I mean, he's a good player. I like Frank Ntilikina. I like R.J. Barrett a little. I like Kevin Knox coming out of Kentucky. And the plus sides of drafting those players was that they were so young, and we knew they would have growing pains.
I've been a believer in Frankie Smokes because defensively, both the metrics and the eye test indicated that he was a very good defender for his age. He was not a disastrously bad shooter from distance, but he was a very, very, very bad scorer. Just a horrific offensive player in terms of scoring himself or attacking the basket to create for others. He's just abysmal. But if you can turn him into a 3-and-D point guard, a guy who can bring the ball up the court, spot up, and then lock down perimeter players on another team, you might be cooking with some fish grease.
Very least for the Knicks, he could be a useful defender because he showed enough in this last few weeks that he can provide something on any winning team, maybe 15 minutes off the bench as a stopper. And as just a ball handler, he's not a terrible ball handler. I'm really excited about him, and I'm thankful that the Knicks did not trade him because there was a few teams interested.
I'm a bit surprised that a team didn't try to pry him away in the way that Orlando gave up very little for Markelle Fultz.
God, that was robbery. But Markelle is not a power forward, so no kink shaming here.
This is true. I still don't know who you were talking about with who robbed who with the Fultz deal.
Oh, I think getting Fultz was a coup by Orlando. I think you absolutely take a chance on him. Clearly something's up because even now they're taking the Philly stance of we don't know when he's going to play. But you get him at that price in a second.
I also agree. If you're in the position of Orlando, that's a move that you make. And I feel like the same way with the Denver Nuggets, who are now kind of a contender. They have a chance, maybe, but throwing those little, I don't even know what I'm looking for as an analog here, like taking little lottery tickets on guys like Michael Porter Jr., who may have talent that supersedes while they were drafted, is a good strategy if you're a team that isn't quite good enough to win a title as currently comprised.
Like certain teams in certain markets have to do that. I think they have to scour the league and look for a value like Smokes or Fultz because you really don't have a voice in free agency as much as the Lakers do. So, yeah, I like that gamble for so many teams on Fultz.
Yeah, I mean, maybe 4 years ago, the perception was that marquee free agents were going to big markets, but they actually weren't.
Mm.
They never were going to the Clippers or Brooklyn or the Nets, or I'm sorry, the Nets, the Knicks, the Clippers, the Lakers. Mm-hmm. But now they are. We've seen this massive influx of talent into New York and Los Angeles in a way that was assumed was happening, but actually wasn't. So there is even greater impetus for teams like Utah or Denver to create teams via trade and taking chances in the lottery and being really aggressive in ways that counteract the realities of being a small market team.
Yeah, and Denver especially because they locked up Jamal Murray, who's not even that great yet, but they paid him because they had an opportunity to and they didn't want to risk it.
So before we exit for the day, my question is this. Can the U.S. put their 2 losses behind them, go out there and want it enough to beat Poland?
They got to put down the grill tongs, let somebody else handle grill master duties, and accept the heartburn that comes with sriracha.
Grill masters, sriracha, Team USA, wanting it more. This is how you get yourself a gold medal.
Mm-hmm.
Or a 7th place medal that's made of some other alloy, perhaps a tin or a nickel.
Or ask Carmelo Anthony to play.
I love cookies.
The solution to all of our woes. More medal. Cookies!
Cookies.